Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Triple F podcast, Faith and Family First, where Jim Hochberg and I are going to be talking to my counterpart all the way across the sea in New Zealand. And we're going to talk about marijuana because I know that you all have been hearing on the radio that there's a high percentage of people here in the state of Hawaii that want legalized recreational marijuana. But do they really know what they say they want? Well, we're going to talk about that. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Well, thank you. Nice to be here again.
Good to be. Actually, I'm more excited about our guest.
Me too.
Okay, because I want to introduce everybody to a really good friend of mine. He's my counterpart in New Zealand with Family First New Zealand, Bob McCoskrie. Bob, it's so good to have you on the show today to smoke pot with us.
Kia ora, Eva, and kia ora, Jim. Yeah. Did I call us dopes?
Yes, actually, we can just light up a few holy smokes and maybe. All right, no, we're gonna have people writing in going Eva, but they know me. They know me. They know I'm joking.
You need hope, not dope.
Hope, not dope. Yes. So, Bob, let's go back. So we're going to talk about marijuana today, and I like having you kind of as a resident expert, because back in, I think, was it 2000? When did you have your referendum? Or you guys don't call it referendum, but
Yeah, no, it was a referendum. The whole country voted on it back in 2020.
2020.
So, yeah, not too long ago. And so, there'd been continued attempts to legalize marijuana. And so finally the Green Party managed to get it to a referendum. And the good news was that by a whisker, by 51 to 49, we managed to defeat it, which has sort of gone against some of the trends in many other countries and also states in the US.
Congratulations.
No, it was good. He did a lot of heavy work on that. So before it was passed, though, what was the pulse of the people in New Zealand? Did they seem to be leaning toward it, and then you had to do a big educational campaign, or do you think people were kind of nervous about it, and so your educational campaign just kind of helped them over the finish line?
No, it was exactly what you were just talking about, and I can guarantee that if you drill down into that polling that you've seen, you'll actually find out quite a bit, because it really depends on what people understand and also what the question is. There was two major misunderstandings that we found with typical families in New Zealand, and I would say in Hawaii as well. And the first is that when they think of pot, they think of someone just smoking a joint, getting a bit high, laughing at their own jokes, being sleepy and having munchies afterwards. But that's referring to your parents' pot, or Woodstock weed, as we used to call it. And it had very low THC. The very low psychoactive ingredient in it was around 2, 3, 4%. What we're dealing with in today's marijuana is a supercharged. I mean, it's a bit like a vintage car versus a Ferrari in terms of the difference between what can be grown now and the THC levels. And so we're talking about edibles, which can be maybe around 15, 20%, but then you get the concentrates, which can be around 67%. And in fact, you can get absolute concentrates of THC, which is 100%. And studies have been found that if you have marijuana over 10% THC, then you're much likely to develop psychological problems. And have psychoactive responses, mental illnesses, etc. So that's the first misunderstanding that we realized, that people thought it was just smoking a joint, a very low THC joint, but it was actually all these products, it was the USB stick, which was actually a vape, so very easy for students to hide. It was butane hash oil, which is the ability to make it at home and get very high concentrate cannabis. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was that a lot of people believe that medicinal marijuana is a possible option and there may be some healing properties in it. The jury is still out on that, but it has been shown to have some benefits around issues of spasticity and also around cancer, pain relief for cancer treatment. But there's still a lot of research to be done. But the difference is you don't grow medicine. There's no other medicine you grow in your backyard. And so this basically medicinal marijuana needs to be regulated. Now, my understanding is that Hawaii has that regulated marijuana.
We do.
But when a lot of people ask about legalizing marijuana, they're basically saying, look, we think that medicinal marijuana should be available, and we also don't think that people should be locked up for smoking a joint. Now, I notice that your legislation says you've already decriminalized as well.
We did.
So,
in fact, so a couple years ago, we decriminalized so that you could have around 3 grams or less and then not be, I think it was like a $25 fine. So what another piece of legislation that is moving is going to decriminalize marijuana for 1 ounce. So 1 ounce or less, and still have only the $25 fine. So yeah, that's kind of they're moving both of these legislation forward, kind of anticipating that if for some reason the recreational marijuana dies, then at least they will have more of a decrim. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at here.
Yeah, so those are the two major misunderstandings that we were able to get people to understand. They thought that by voting for legalized marijuana, that sick relatives could access medicinal marijuana. And that's what the industry does. They sort of use medicinal marijuana as a soft approach to getting what their ultimate goal is, and that is legalization of recreational use. And you've got to follow the dollars. Now, remember, for some of your older watchers, they just need to think back around the whole smoking debate. And 40 or 50 years ago, everybody was being told that smoking was good for you. It actually it could be beneficial health-wise. They even had advertisements featuring doctors advertising which brand of cigarette to smoke. Now, of course, the science has caught up and we realize that it is harmful, it is addictive, and the companies have set out to addict people for profit. The new tobacco industry is now focused on marijuana. And it is based on profit and it's based on addiction. It is not based on harm minimization, and it is not based on keeping your children safe and your families free from the fallout from addiction and mental health decline. So people need to understand exactly what recreational marijuana use is about. They also need to understand about the whole new lot of products. It's not just smoking a joint in the backyard and getting the munchies. It is way, way worse than that. We're dealing with a big industry. And if you can get people to understand that, then you will actually get them on side and understand, no, we don't want to go down that extreme. And look, Eva, probably we can get into specifics of your legislation, because we thought our legislation was pretty extreme and we voted against it, fortunately, just. I looked at your legislation, proposed legislation. It is out there, man.
That's how we roll here in Hawaii, right? I mean, if our legislators are going to do bills, they're going to make sure that they do what nobody else is doing. In fact, we actually had our AG saying that we're going to have the best bill in the nation, you know, and yet all of the other AGs all probably believe the same thing. But, you know, I want to go back to something you said as we dive into the actual legislation and what it says, because we're already suffering here in Hawaii of a major vaping epidemic among our keiki, our kids. And so we don't want marijuana recreational for a lot of reasons, but right now the biggest reason is because it's going to end up in the hands of our kids. It's going to end up in these things they're vaping, right? I mean, you talked about the concentrate, how these kids are going to be putting this poison in their body. We already had, just a couple weeks ago, we had a couple of middle school students that ended up in the emergency room because of vaping and what was in their vaping products, and marijuana was part of it. In fact, I'm not exactly sure if the toxicology report has come out yet. I'm only going based on what we were told, that it was predominantly marijuana. So this is kind of what we're talking about, right? And our legislators in their current bill think that they're going to fix all of these problems by making it so that they can't advertise near schools, right? That these edible products cannot be in packaging that's going to be attractive to kids. But Bob, you and I know that that's a lot of pretty words that is not going to mean a thing when it goes into practice.
Well, what are the penalties for giving something to children? What are the criminal penalties for violating these protections?
It's in there. It's in their 300-page bill.
No, but what are the Class A life in prison, traffic ticket?
No, it's
that's the thing. If they seriously wanted to protect the kids, it's not hard to do in the bill.
No, it's not. But I'm curious, Bob, because you actually are looking at this legislation through eyes that just kind of know. I mean, your experience with this stuff. So I'm curious. Why don't you tell us about your concerns about this bill, and Jim and I will jump in.
Well, I think, the promise is that they will regulate it. Harm minimization, and they're going to regulate it. That is a complete and utter myth. And if you want proof of why it's a farcical promise, just look at the so-called regulation of alcohol. It's been a failed experiment. Alcohol is targeted at our young kids with Alcopops. Kids can easily access it, and there's shops on every corner. They tend to be targeted at the disadvantaged communities, which is how the industry rolls. They deliberately target those areas, and the advertising is everywhere. Second classic example is smoking. That's supposed to be regulated as well. They haven't done a very good job of that either. Completely available. So when they promise this, we'll regulate it, we'll put plastic on it, we'll make sure there's no labels. I mean, I just laughed at your legislation when it said that if you've got a person growing dope at home, so in other words, they're a drug dealer grower at home with a family growing it in their backyard.
They're a farmer, Bob. They're just a farmer.
Oh, yeah, of course. And apparently the kids are just going to look away. They're not going to look at it. They're not going to accidentally help themselves to it. They're not going to be impressed by the fact that their family member is growing drugs. And apparently the drugs have to be kept in the house in a plastic bag and they can't be labeled. Now, are you telling me that your cops, your police force, have so much time that they can go around monitoring all this? I mean, it's just a farcical promise, and it's time for Hawaii people to just see reality and get through the smoke screen of the lies being told by the marijuana industry. We call it cannabis over here in New Zealand, but I call it dope because that's effectively what it makes you do. And it seems like some of your politicians have been smoking it too much because, I mean, I looked at, like it seals, it's got to be stored in a sealed, child resistant and resealable packaging with original labels. I mean, a cop's going to go into every home that's got a marijuana bush out the back and monitor all this. But what I thought was really concerning, there was two major concerns with your legislation. The first is that it says that you can grow up to 6 plants.
Oh, yes, the infamous 6 plants, yes. That could be, what size? What size, right? Somebody could have, and I know you probably have a different way of looking at it, but here's how I'm looking at it. Different people have different green thumb abilities, right? So you're going to have some people that one plant is going to be huge with a lot of stuff on it. And they can have 6 of those because they don't have any limitation on the size of the plants, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so we actually did some research into this because under our proposals, we were going to be allowed 4. So I just adjusted the maths and looked at some of the science of it. And the fact of the matter is that now marijuana can be grown in the hydroponic indoor setup. So it doesn't even need to be in the backyard. You can have it in the spare bedroom. You can have it in the kids' bedroom. Hey, that sounds really cool, doesn't it? And what the science says is that basically you can grow plants so that you can get very high concentrate THC marijuana, but one plant could be producing around 1,500 grams per annum. Now, when you do all the maths and you figure out you've got 6 plants, and I did it conservatively because you can get about 3 joints out of a gram. But I did it conservative, right? And I said, okay, let's say 2 joints, only 2 joints. So each joint is 0.5 of a gram. I figured out that one plant would give you 8 joints a day. So if you've got 6 plants doing very well and you know how to grow it in your kid's bedroom, then you're going to have up to about 50 joints per day and about 18,000 plus joints over the whole year. That sounds really good, doesn't it? And I know for a fact that you're not going to be able to smoke that much. So what are you going to do with it? You're going to deal it. And all you're doing is you're creating the perfect crime wave, and families are going to suffer. And the fact that they can do it in an unregulated place like a family home should be sounding massive warning bells for Hawaiian families. What was the other thing that I saw?
Well, before you move on to the second thing, the other thing about Hawaii, and I'm not sure about New Zealand, but we have perpetual summer. So we don't have a season of weather that marijuana will not continue to grow. So I don't know if you were thinking there was a winter season where it would go dormant. So
no,
we have around the clock growing weather here.
Oh yeah, and it would be see, and going back to the 70s, Bob, you kind of talked about Woodstock. So Jim and I are both familiar kind of with that time.
You were both there, right?
Yeah, Jim was there. Jim went to Woodstock.
I'm older than she is.
Yeah, he's old. But so here in Hawaii back in the 70s, people talked about we call it pakalolo here in Hawaii, right? That's our Hawaiian word for it. And they used to have what they called Maui Waui and Kona Gold, and these were back in the 70s. I mean, people, stoners, that's what they did, right? They just kind of listened to rock music and smoke pot. We have some local bands here, Cecilia and Kapono, we call them C&K and Kalapana, and people used to just sit around and just smoke pot and just listen to this music. But going back to how you started this, we're talking about levels of THC that us people in our generation have no idea what that's like. And now you're talking about, you guys call it grams here. We look at it in ounces, right? And so according to the bill, I think it's up to 3 ounces. I think they're trying to legalize, which we were told could be 60 to 120 joints, depending on how you roll them.
So you're actually revealing your large appetite that you can't measure marijuana by the gram. You have to go by an ounce.
Well, that's how we roll.
That's pretty interesting, Eva.
That is how we roll. But I mean, but that's what, at the hearing, a couple of years ago when they were trying to pass this, we actually had a guy in our drug enforcement agency that actually brought, at that time, just 1 ounce. He wanted to show what even 1 ounce of marijuana looked like, because people, they think of a cup, right? And they think of a little ounce and they're like, oh, what is that? A couple of joints? I mean, but Bob, you just told us what we're talking about. We're talking about an individual person having a lot of joints in their hand and available to them that they cannot possibly smoke alone. There is no way.
Maybe, though, that's a good point, because there's wet weight and there's dry weight. So instead of thinking in terms of an ounce of liquid, we need to make sure that we're telling people, when you buy fresh basil at the grocery store, that's by dry weight.
Right.
So you get, it's a couple of grams, and it'll last you a very long time because you're cooking with it, right?
Well, and I think that's the point that Bob makes. So like, you can have 6 plants in your house, but when you're walking about and shopping and all that, you can have up to 3 ounces. And there is no one individual that needs that much pot on their body. And so I see what Bob is saying is that, what are you going to do with that extra pot, right? You're going to become a drug dealer. You're going to give it away or sell it. And that's kind of what we need to be concerned about, is that we're talking about some really evil stuff here. I'm sorry, Bob, I did not mean to cut you off. So
what was the second thing you wanted to share?
Well, it's probably even a bigger red flag. I mean, apart from the fact that, you're going to have drug dealers at home with kids and they somehow think they're going to separate children from drugs being grown in their own home. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But here's the second problem. In our legislation, they said that they would limit the THC that could be grown in the marijuana to 15%.
How would they do
Okay,
that?
now that's still way more than Woodstock weed of 2 to 4%, but they were going to limit it to 15%. How they were going to police that, I don't know. And they were going to be strict on edibles and the concentrates. Now, in your legislation, there is no limit. So effectively, what the marijuana industry will do is that they will put THC into every product they can. They will put it in water bottles. They will put it in gummy bears. They will put it in cookies. They will put it in even nose sprays, eye lotion. They even do it in suppositories, believe it or not, Eva, although we don't want to think about that. They basically will put THC into any product. They will put it into, for example, highlighters. So children can be sitting in a class and they can be basically, as you said, consuming THC, and nobody even knows because it's the vaping. There is no smoke, there is no smell, so they're getting high in class. They can put it in the water bottle. They can put it basically in the USB stick, and you can vape off that. So it's very secretive, and that was the problem that when I went to Colorado to have a look at this, schools were saying it's so hard to police because vaping is so easy, and with the THC in it, you just can't monitor it, unlike lighting up a cigarette and there's smoke and there's smell going with it. I do want to say, though, that if you don't know what marijuana smells like, and I think most Hawaiians probably know what it smells like, when you get the full blast of lots of it around, it stinks. And if you don't believe me, go to Colorado,
Washington,
to Pueblo. Yeah, go to Washington, go to Chicago, go
California.
to Vancouver. You cannot avoid it. It stinks. It's got that skunk smell. In fact, I went to a church, the church grounds in Colorado, just down from Colorado Springs, and the church was next door to a grow, and a grow is, a commercial growing of the marijuana plant. And they say that when the wind is blowing from the grow towards the church, they can't actually have church because the smell is so pungent. It's that bad. But look, my red flag around your legislation is that there is no THC limit. They're not even trying to limit the high potency product. And the high potency product, the research has shown that even above 10%, the psychotic episodes, the schizophrenia for people who are using it on a regular basis is the risk is 3 to 5 times higher. So you're going to have a lot of mental illness. Just before I finish, that is the other key argument that you will hear. They'll say, think of all the tax money we're going to raise.
Oh, yeah.
And I noticed that they proposed raising it, the surcharge from 10% to, it was 15% or 14%.
Yeah.
Don't believe the lie that taxes are going to cover the social harm of addiction, mental illness, people not being able to go to work, workplace accidents, people driving stoned on the road, which is a major issue. There's just so much negative fallout. In fact, there was a study done in Colorado, which the media didn't want to know about, but they figured out that for every $1 of marijuana tax that you raise, there's about $5 in social costs. So don't believe that lie.
What my favorite parts of this bill was when they want to make sure that people, that they use that word that you love so much. They use equity because they wanted to make sure that there are some,
everybody's equally dumb as everybody else,
and everybody has equal access, right, to this. The other thing that made me laugh is they want to reach out to the crime syndicate and make sure that they actually come and fold into this new business legally. Now, I'm laughing because I'm imagining all these guys that are all these crime lords, and they're like, yes, I want to get registered so that I can open my premises to them raiding me at any time to make sure I'm following the law. Why, yes, sign me up. I'm thinking, I mean, it's a good, the words look great on paper, when you read it. And if you try to read it with an open mind and you're thinking, oh, they're trying to really make this a good bill, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible for them to make a good bill.
So
I mean, I'm sure that crime lords just love paying taxes, eh? They just really want to,
and they want to be. They want to be legal, Bob. They desire that more than anything, is to hang around.
I saw The Godfather, and that's what Michael wanted to do. He wanted to make the family legit.
Yes. So right now, you person listening and watching right now that are illicitly selling drugs, you will have the opportunity to lock arms with the state of Hawaii and become a legitimized business, shaking hands with our government officials. Good for you.
And for those of us in the audience that really are not very keen on this bill, I think we need to really view it as a huge spiritual attack on kids and the family. And if you just look at what our government's been, I'm moving to the free state of Florida to get out of this spiritual warfare here. The gender stuff on the kids, that's a part of this same spiritual attack. The drug thing, the taking kids away from their parents when parents aren't that interested in gender reassignment things and all that. We need fervency in our spiritual life on this issue.
Yes, we do. And while you viewers and listeners, while you like this video, you share it, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video. I want you all to know that Bob over there in New Zealand and Jim and I here in Hawaii and all the family policy leaders across the state, we do what we do because we care about the place that we live. We care about the families. We care about the children. And we're going to be in this battle until Jesus calls us home. So Bob, in this last minute that we have, just give us that last final reason why Hawaii should not go down the recreational marijuana route.
Well, if you're concerned about mental health and you're concerned about the plummeting rates, especially amongst our young people, the worst thing you could do is legalize cannabis. If you think the black market is going to go away because the product is suddenly legal, think about smoking and alcohol. They're legal. Is there still a black market? Of course there is. If you think it's okay for a drug dealer to be growing drugs at home, perhaps in the child's living room or in the child's bedroom, then that is just hugely dangerous. They won't be able to keep these products away from children. In fact, by legalizing it, what you're doing is you're saying to kids, actually, it's not that big an issue. We think it's actually okay. And that's a dangerous message to send. And the other thing is that big marijuana wants to addict your kids. They operate on making a profit, and they make a profit from addiction. And the earlier they can get you addicted, the better. Big marijuana do not have any morals. Don't let them in the country.
Amen. And if you want to know more about Bob and Family First New Zealand, you can go to familyfirst.org.nz and you can look at all the great research that Bob did in regards to marijuana. And on behalf of Jim and I, Bob, we really appreciate you coming and sharing your mana'o, your wisdom and your knowledge with us today.
Mahalo. Thank you very much.
Take care.